Okay, so Fuji just came out with some pretty exciting news. GFX 100 version 2, native tilt-shift lenses, plus pretty interesting lens roadmap, and one really cool-looking fast prime, the 55 1.7. I did pre-order the camera, just in case. I'm not quite sold yet on if I want to buy it. I did want to lend my thoughts about it because as someone who has shot with Fuji's medium format cameras now, on actual paid photography gigs for real clients, not just blogging, I think I have some pretty insightful details that I could share on whether it's worth it. And the first thing that I would say is that if you're looking to upgrade the camera, do not do it because you think it's going to give you better image quality. I think there is a new sensor, but it is still 102 megapixels. And truthfully, I would be floored if there is any type of significant noticeable improvement in the overall image quality on the still side. We'll get to the video later. So I don't think it's going to give you better photos than this already does. So if that's what you're looking for, just keep your current GFX and arguably keep your full frame camera. That's what you're currently shooting on. I did shoot a really comprehensive review on this camera, and I spent over a year shooting it. And it was never published because I never finished it, because I got bored, because reviewing gear bores the hell out of me. And now that the GFX 2 is announced, there's really no point in doing that. But I do have a lot of thoughts that I can still share about this camera. And namely, the biggest complaints that I had about it, the biggest gripes I had, seem to have been alleviated with this new version. And really, it just comes down to user experience. And when you get to the professional level, when you're shooting for actual clients, user experience is so critical because you want your clients to feel good on set, and you don't want to burden them with headaches, with glitches, with buggy things. You don't want to be fighting with your gear in front of the client. And that is something that I frequently did with this camera, much to my clients' amusements. They're really good sports. But the GFX, it's a really buggy camera, especially when you're tethering to Capture One, or if you're trying to use a cam ranger to it. I shoot architecture, so I'm frequently doing both. And let's just say that there were just very inconvenient times that the camera decided it just didn't want to work tethering, and I would have to pull out my Canon, my R5C, which I'm shooting on right now, just to get the job done, because Canon cameras are just workhorse cameras. They just work. The camera is faster. It's got a faster processor, so it's going to be less laggy, less buggy, presumably, and it has a higher frames per second, maximum 8 frames per second, which is really cool if you're shooting sports or portraits, which I do from time to time. And the autofocus is going to be significantly better. Medium format isn't exactly known for their snappiness when it comes to focus, and the GFX was a little bit better, but this was still not what I would call an autofocus wizard by any means. It doesn't compare to something like the Canon or the Sony, or even Fuji's crop sensor cameras. So it'll be very interesting to see if the new autofocus system comes closer to what these full frame systems do. And if it does, then it's going to have a lot of people talking. Then it's going to get really interesting. I expect it to be better, but I still think it'll probably fall a little bit short. And I still don't think that this is the camera to pick if you're going to be shooting anything, any type of like fast-moving wildlife or sports. But it's good to know that it's not going to be a slouch either if you have to do it. The body seems to be an improvement. Haven't held it, so I can't comment, but the grip looks like it's really comfortable. And I like the addition of the buttons, the 3 buttons that they put right here next to the shutter. That's going to be clutch. I'm a big fan of having as many customizable buttons on a camera that you can have for obvious reasons. It just makes life a lot easier. So that's really cool. It'll be interesting to see how well the build quality is, although I'm not too worried about it. And yeah, the biggest improvement other than that I see, and a really interesting looking film simulation, is the video capabilities. So let's talk about that. The video on this camera is more of a gimmick. It's pixel binned, and I've never used it. Why would you buy this camera to shoot video? There's this little button right here that switches from stills to cinema mode, and I don't think I've ever switched it to the other mode. Like it's never been turned on. I would never in a million years, especially when you have so many other options, pick this camera to shoot a video project with. That's going to change now because Fuji really they just packed the GFX 2 with a bunch of cinema features that are on actual cinema cameras. Like you've got waveform and you've got false color and things like that. And you've got a variety of different aspect ratios and crop modes and resolutions that all look very interesting. Although I am really disappointed that there is no open gate in 8K. I was really hoping for a full sensor readout. But I understand fucking physics get in the way, and it probably would have pushed the camera to its limits with a sensor this big to do that. It's maybe not realistic, but I was really hoping for it. However, there is still an in-camera de-squeeze 2x anamorphic mode where it actually de-squeezes the footage for you, so you don't even have to do it in your NLE. Now, it only works on 2x anamorphic, from what I understand, so if you have 1.5 or 1.6 or 1.8, you're still going to have to do that yourself, but I really like shooting 2x anamorphic the handful of times that it makes sense to do it for my clients, so that'll be really cool. And then, of course, you've got proper 10-bit codecs, variety of resolutions, the 5.8 widescreen where it uses the entire width of the sensor, but not the entire height, looks quite lovely. That's probably the mode where I'll probably hang out in if I decide to make this a usable video camera. So that brings me to the question, is this worth buying for video? And the answer to that, it's nuanced. If you are strictly a cinematographer, a video person, then obviously no. For $7,500, there are a variety of proper cinema rigs that you can get that'll serve you much better. This is still a stills body, so it's not ideal. Why am I holding this camera like it's the actual camera? This is not the camera that we're talking about, but whatever. You get the point. If you're a hybrid shooter, I probably still would rather go with something like one of Fuji's crop sensor cameras. The Canon R5C is fantastic, except for C-Log 3. And, all the millions of cameras that Sony has that I can't even name at the moment, but there's a ton of options. If you're a hybrid guy, you really have to think about the kind of video work that you do. If you're going on actual video sets and productions with like big crews where you got ACs and you've got grips and gaffers and entire teams, nobody's going to want to shoot with this. You're going to want a proper cinema body with SDI ports, so you can rig all your wireless transmitters and your follow focus units, and something that's just a little bit more ergonomically attuned to that kind of workplace. For someone like me who does not work on those sets, my video work consists of primarily shooting talking heads, documentary, obviously YouTube content, whatever short films I feel like doing, pretty much just stuff where it's primarily just me and maybe like one or two people helping me. And in those situations, I think that the GFX 102 can be a fantastic hybrid stills and video camera. It could be the camera that just finally lets me consolidate my gear. That being said, it's a very unique skill set that this camera has, feature set, because it is a really large sensor and it's going to give you a very unique looking image. The focus fall off, obviously a shallower depth field if that's what you're into, though it's not always ideal. And I imagine it's going to be a very sharp, a very clean image, which may or may not be a good thing, but we'll see when more footage comes out. It's really hard to struggle to figure out who this camera is ideally for. Because if you're already a GFX owner and you shoot the type of stuff that somebody who needs this high-resolution camera would shoot, like landscapes, still life, product photography, architecture, You don't really need the camera to be fast and snappy. You don't need the 8 frames per second. You don't need all the improvements to the processor, although they are really nice. And from what I understand, there might be a slight improvement in dynamic range. But I don't think there's going to be that big of an improvement that it justifies spending the money. If you're that kind of shooter, you're probably better off sticking with the GFX that you already own, or picking one up secondhand, or just waiting for the prices to drop, because you know damn well these are going to be very cheap very soon. And that might be the smarter way to go. If you are somebody who wants to shoot portraits and maybe a little bit of lifestyle, some action, and you want that medium format look, and you've got, $7,500 burning a hole in your pocket, and yeah, have at it. Who am I to tell you, what you should and shouldn't buy? Buy it, love it, enjoy it, have at it. If you are a hybrid shooter, somebody who wants to get serious into video, and you have a rich and sustainable photography business already, then I can see it making sense. Because again, if you're just shooting video, then no, do not get this camera just for that. But if you're already getting the kind of photography clients that justify having a camera like this, and you just want to have one body to shoot some video, maybe you want to get some video assets for your client, maybe when you travel, you don't want to take a bunch of different cameras, maybe you just want to take one camera, which is often the case with me because traveling means compromises on weight. I think I'm actually convincing myself to keep my pre-order now that I think about it, now that I share my thoughts out loud. But that begs the question, I have a C70 and I have an R5C already, and I have pretty fleshed out lens lineup with RF lenses. I only own 2 native lenses for this system. It would not make sense for me to spend an atrocious amount of money buying more native lenses if I go all in on this system and still keeping my Canon stuff. It's a lot of money to have in camera lenses, and I probably won't be using all of them. So I will probably sell my Canon gear. And that brings me to my next thoughts. My next series of thoughts is that actually what I'm more excited about than the camera body itself is native tilt shift lenses. Oh my fucking God. Finally, thank you, Fuji, because I have been adapting Canon tilt shift lenses for the entire time that I've owned this camera. And let me tell you, the 24 and the 17 leave a little to be desired, because those lenses just don't have the resolving power for a sensor of this magnitude. The Canon 50mm lens, which I use quite often and is my favorite lens of all time, in my opinion, it is like the best lens that Canon has ever made, for stills or video. It is the gold standard. I'm going to be buried with that lens. That holds up very nicely on this sensor, so I would definitely keep that lens, which is probably why I won't be buying the 85mm tilt shift, at least not yet. I'm happy with the 50, so definitely getting the 30mm tilt shift. And that 55-1.7 looks like a very intriguing lens. I think that's going to be, I don't know the exact math, but like a 40mm full frame equivalent focal length. And that's a very interesting focal length. It's actually one of my favorite focal lengths, because on my X Pro 3, I use the 27mm pancake lens, which ends up being about the same. And that lens is like permanently glued to that camera. And some of the best images that I've ever taken, like some of my favorite shots, have been with that combination. So I'm going to be very intrigued to try that out. It's a faster lens. It's going to be a bigger sensor. So I definitely pre-ordered that, and I'm definitely keeping it. The 2 lenses, for sure. So that's going to make it a lot easier to transition into having a complete Fuji GFX medium format kit. The only thing that I feel like this system is lagging lens-wise at the moment is telephoto options. And that's why I use my R5C as much as I do, because I've got the 70-200 RF lens, which is a fantastic lens. And whenever I need that extra focal length, I always pull it out. I think 80% of the images that I've shot on the Canon camera have actually been with the 70-200. And so that brings up another interesting question. If you are somebody who is not in this ecosystem, should you buy a GFX? Should you buy a used one? I would think long and hard, because as somebody who loves this system, as somebody who has made good money shooting on this camera for my clients and has taken a lot of beautiful images that I personally love, I don't think it's absolutely necessary. And I really wouldn't stress it too much. I don't think there's anything that I've shot with this camera that I couldn't shoot on my R5. Some of my favorite images that I've taken over the course of time that I've had this camera have actually been on the R5C or on the X Pro 3. And actually, most of them on the X Pro 3, which is the cheapest camera I own, the smallest camera I own, and I really only have one lens for it. And the reason for me loving these images so much is that it's frequently the camera that I have with me. And we've heard it before. The best camera is the one that you have with you. And I often actually leave this camera behind because it is so slow, it is so buggy, and it just adds more weight, and the lenses are much bigger. And I really only pull this camera out when I have a very specific shot in mind, usually something that I've planned, I've scouted ahead of time. Otherwise, this camera stays at home. When I travel, it stays in the safe in the hotel. When I was in Barcelona, I think I took it out for a handful of shots that I planned. And the rest of the time, I shot mostly on the X Pro 3 because it's lighter, it's more nimble, and it just doesn't draw as much attention to itself, which this camera, as big as it is, obviously does. And it's very expensive, so I'm a little reluctant to just be walking around with it half the time. So for that reason, I don't really think it's necessary if you just love photography, you just want to enjoy the process of photography. I don't know that these medium format GFX cameras are the right cameras for you. That being said, the new camera is going to be faster and probably a little bit less laggy, so it might still be more enjoyable to use. But I still don't see myself using that as an everyday camera, or, a lot of those shots that I love taken on the X Pro 3 and on the R5 have been more, how shall I say, organic, editorial style, fire from the hip. While this camera is usually on a tripod for something that I've planned and scouted, and either I'm waiting for the light to be perfect and beautiful, or I'm lighting it myself with flash. And usually I have one of the other cameras strapped to my waist or on a camera strap, and I'm just popping off shots as I see them. And I just find that very often, even though those shots may not be as pretty as the shots that I get on this camera, may not be as sharp, may not have the resolution, may not have that polish, that shine, that hero shot that's going to go in my portfolio. Very often, I find that on a personal level, the shots that I get with the X Pro 3 and with the R5 with the 70-200 end up being some of my just personal favorites, the ones that I enjoy looking at the most, the ones that really complement the story that I'm trying to tell. And I've actually ended up creating a lot of portfolio-worthy images with these cameras, which just goes to show you that these are just tools, and you choose the right tool for the job. So before you get starry-eyed over the specs and all the new features, and the fact that the price is actually really fucking good, because the original GFX was like $9,000. This is actually like, I think almost $2,000 cheaper. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember the exact amount. Before you get caught up in all that, ask yourself if you really need this camera to create the images that you want to make. For me personally, I've gotten so used to the image quality, and don't even get me started on the 16-bit RAW files from this camera. I swear it's like a cheat code, and they just edit so beautifully. Like, I am just, at this point, spoiled by the image quality that medium format GFX gives me. So I'm not going back. Either I'm keeping this or I'm getting the new camera. And the more I talk, the more I'm convincing myself to get the new camera. So I'm stuck, man. There's no going back for me. But that doesn't mean that you have to join me here. And I don't want you to feel compelled, or anyone out there to feel compelled, to spend the kind of money that it would require to get into this ecosystem, assuming you're going to buy native lenses. Because if that new camera is $7,500, and this camera is, I think it's $6,000, but let's just say you can probably get one for like $4,000 after this camera is released. You're still going to be spending, $2,500 on a lens, on the G mount lenses. And if you're going to buy a handful of them, that's a lot of money to drop for something that you may not need. And, you might get a better value going with a full frame or even a crop sensor. Like one of Fuji's crop sensor cameras are fucking awesome. I love them. And I'll probably end up getting the XS20 at some point for my trip to Japan too, because the video features on that camera punch way above their weight class, especially for the price. So with all that being said, I'm definitely committed to the 55-1.7 just because I want it, because I fucking want it, because it's the perfect lens for my environmental portraits. It's the perfect 35 to 40 millimeter focal length that I really like for those type of shots. It's fast and it's going to go beautifully with this sensor. And of course, the 30 millimeter tilt shift, which is $4,000. It's going to just burn a hole in my pocket, but I think it's worth it, especially because most of my client work is architectural photography. So I will definitely use it. And even for my own personal stuff, portfolio building shit, I will definitely use it for that. So I'm committed to the lenses, and the lenses are always the most important part. Cameras depreciate. There's a new one comes out every 2 or 3 years these days. Lenses, though, last forever. Like that 30 millimeter tilt shift that I buy is going to last me probably for the next 12 years. And same with really any of these really high quality lenses. Same with the Canon RF lenses or the Sony G Master lenses. So the lenses are always the most important thing. And if you're going to if you're going to invest into a camera system, invest in one where the value goes a lot further, getting you the lenses you need. It's always better to have a better variety of lenses than to have like the shiniest new camera that you can afford that's going to be outdated in 2 years when the next one comes out anyway. Now, if money is no object, or your business is doing well, personal finance is a personal thing, so I'm not telling anyone what to do with their money. Yeah, the system's fucking great. If you get it, I hope you enjoy it. But if you don't get it, don't feel bad and don't feel pressured. And please, please, please do not go into debt to get into the system. It's absolutely not necessary. You can get great value for much less expensive camera systems. Even, like I said, Fuji's crop sensor cameras and their lenses are much cheaper, but they're still a great value. They still have great quality. So do not feel pressured to put this on a credit card. Don't be stupid. Otherwise, if you do buy it, enjoy it. I would love to hear your thoughts. I will probably share mine if I decide to pull the trigger, which I think at this point, I'm probably 70% of the way there. So if anyone wants to convince me in the comments on why I should or shouldn't do it, I probably won't listen. I'll probably do whatever the fuck I want anyway. But it's always fun to talk shit, talk shop. So hit me up in the comments, follow me on Instagram, all that